We're going to be talking about some data tonight. Here we go. I don't even know.
Okay,
That's great. Got nothing.
so thank you very much. Way back at the beginning of the school year, after the roughly 1/3 of the year, we gave kind of some update presentations on social and community kind of data with discipline and information and things like that. And then also we had given preliminary testing data for the fall. So this is our second trimester update. And then we'll be back again in the summertime to kind of close up, the full year once we have the end of year data. So all of the discipline data just captures from December to February, because that's the 3 months we're kind of looking at in this time frame. And so this first slide here shows total incidents. The first column always being 2021, the second being this year, and the same color means the same month. So that first row, there was 102 total reported, office referrals last year, down to 86 this year in the same month. January of 22, which was 1 year ago, 121 total incidents. That was down to 94 this year in January. February, we get a little bit of a bump up. It was 113 last year, 125 this year. February is a very interesting month that you're going to see throughout the data. It was a challenging month this year in many ways. One of the things that caused a bit of a spike up in some of our categories was our clamp down on cell phones, that we really have been heavily enforcing that policy. That's always kind of been in place. But after a lot of difficulty with some cyber incidents and things like that, we've really closed that loop, where our mantra is cell-free classrooms. And that has created some upticks in behaviors that you'll see as we've addressed that. So some of the increase year over year is attributed to that, but February was also just kind of a tough month this year in general. Looking at the major categories, that first category is defiance. December of last year, there were 30 reported incidents of defiant types of behavior. That dropped to 9 in December of this year. There were 32 incidences of defiance in January of last year. That dropped to 12 this year. And there were 35 instances in February. That dropped to 18 this year. So that category had the biggest drop overall. And we certainly felt that in terms of kids kind of following up with what was asked of them.
Which one does the phone fall under?
The phone has been reported primarily under that disruption category. Okay. A little bit of it was under the defiance category, but most people are putting it under disruptive types of behavior.
Okay.
And some of it, yeah. So disruption, again, interesting. That's been on the upswing. That was the same in the first trimester. It seems like a lot of our behaviors that have been rising this year are that disruptive kind of behavior in the classroom. None of it's giant leaps, but that's the one category that consistently keeps being above month over month the prior year. That third area of disrespect, again, pretty substantial drops each month in reports of disrespectful conduct happening towards teachers from learners or between learners. The physical aggression category, which includes any kind of fighting or things like that, that again, pretty steep drops every month except February, which again, February felt like a tough month and the data kind of supported that. But a huge drop month over month, year over year in January. With physical aggression, slight drops from a pretty low base to an even lower base in December, and a slight uptick in February. Bullying and harassment, also pretty large drops with the exception of February. We went from 8 reported instances of bullying or harassing in December of 2021. There were none this past December. 3 instances of that sort of reported behavior January of last year. There were none this year. And then 3 reports in February of last year. That went up very slightly to 5 this year. Drugs, pretty consistently at 0 in terms of drug usage or discovery of drugs in the school. There was 1 case in January of last year and none anywhere else, so including this year. And weapons across the board, no instances of that. And then profanity is another interesting one that we have, again, seen some upticks this year. That was in the first trimester data. There was more profane kind of language reported and that's continued. The one exception being December, where we had a large drop, but then we had a pretty comparable increase in January, and same thing in February. So that's something that we're aware of. That's been a concern this school year. Much more instances of teachers confronting that behavior when they hear it, but it is definitely something we've noticed is more common. F-bomb is being one of the ones we find ourselves addressing a lot.
David, how is this relayed? Like, is this the Alma stuff or something like, how is this kept as data?
This is office referrals inputted by teachers and stored in educators handbook. So these, we can then pull the categories year over year out. So these are the actual categories out of educators handbook. So these are teacher generated referrals that are then acted on by an administrator.
Okay.
So then I just combined the 3-month span that we're looking at. So December, January, February, and looked at the cohort. So the first data point, the 21-22, is the class of 2023 last year. The second one is this year, because I think it's interesting data to look at specific grades or grade levels and see where there might still be some trends. An expected significant downshift as these learners went from juniors to seniors. So that was good. Our seniors are already started at a pretty low level last year, but their behaviors have continued to decline. This current year's juniors have been pretty stable from where they were in this 3-month span last year. They had one additional incident in their junior year at the same 3-month window of time than they had sophomore year. But again, the raw number quite low, 40 over a 3-month span of time in a class of 90 some odd learners that's not concerning to us. That's a pretty normal number of behaviors we would expect to address. The class of 2025, this year's sophomores, they had nearly 120 incidents at this 3-month window last year. That's been cut down to just a little bit under 80 this year, as they're now in the sophomore group. This year's freshman class, pretty large spike, and they are currently at the top of our overall incidents for the whole school year. This is not uncommon in the transition from 8th to 9th grade to see an uptick in behavior. So we're not shocked, but it is a group that we're focusing a little more attention on now to see how we can bend that back down in the next 3 months. This is the current 8th grade group. This is the largest class in the entire school. There's 112 or 110, something like that in this grade level. Very, very slight tick down. I think there's 2 less overall incidents than they had last year when they were in 7th grade. So pretty stable. Our 7th graders this year, which we kind of anticipated, if you recall from our first trimester presentation, we created a 7th grade social kind of class because we saw at the end of last year some pretty concerning increases in behaviors with this group. So it's not surprising to us that in this 3-month window of time, we have a large jump. But that's part of why we already had things in place to support this group. So they have roughly triple the amount of behavior concerns in the December to February timeframe. And then, of course, we don't have data to do a cohort for the current 6th graders because they were in 5th grade last year, and we don't have that data at the middle high school.
Oh. Help me understand this. When I look at these charts, am I looking at a cohort from 2028 to what they were in 2021, 22?
Correct. Same group of learners. Yep.
It's the same cohort.
Correct. Yep. I think that's important data to have as we drill in a little bit deeper, because part of our goal is to continue to get more proactive and not reactive. So one of the things that the admin team is doing on Tuesday, while the staff are doing their kind of mandatory yearly PDs through Primex, we're planning on drilling even deeper into this data and planning some programming for the last 3 months of the year, precisely with this cohort and these cohorts in mind, to help support them going into next year and continue some of that decline in problematic behavior. So the cohorts were actually the most important thing for me in this moment, but I do think it's important to recognize where some of our increases are coming from.
It's also great because as the cohort goes through,
Right.
they get different subjects, different teachers. So
Correct.
So
Yeah.
that helps you determine the causal relationships.
I 100% agree.
What else? I don't know if you have it, but what else would be really cool is to see, like, let's say the seniors, the class of 2023, what was it freshman, sophomore, junior, senior year? Do you just not have that yet?
We do. We have,
Oh.
I could pull cohort data for, 2 years with Educators Handbook at this point, because we've only had the tool that long. I only focus on this particular trimester with this group, but at the end of the year, definitely for our total presentation, I think that'd be helpful to have to see how our efforts over 2 years with cohorts. That's a great idea.
And then not only that, you see, like, obviously they come as freshmen, they're like, wow.
Exactly. Yeah.
You just hope that they kind of get more mature. And then, I mean, that's the way it's probably always going to be, is they're just going to be like, crazy freshmen, and then hopefully they start to.
But as we see those patterns, the other thing we can do is knowing that they come in and they're,
Yeah.
we can start to be more diligent with planning,
Yeah.
especially you can even get down to the subject level where they're having some of these issues or the areas of the building.
Yeah.
The more we drill into these cohorts and the more specific we get, the more we can then work with our school counseling team and with PD for teachers to address those areas.
Yeah. Yep.
So the data from Educator's Handbook has been really nice to have for sure. I also pulled up suspension kind of instances. Again, this is the first column of the same color. I apologize that the first and third groups look almost the same on my screen. They're different colors, but the first is always last year, the second of the same color as this year. So there were 18 incidences that warranted an out-of-school suspension last December, only 9 this December. There were 9 instances that warranted out-of-school suspension last January, down to 5 this January. But again, kind of in line with the pattern with this current February, we did see an uptick in behaviors that led to out-of-school suspension.
Did you say you had like thoughts of why February is so bad?
I'm not 100% sure
Is it
that
across the board, like all the time, February is just this horrible month.
it's not consistent. I mean, you can look across the cohort. It did jump a little bit last February from last January, but certainly not to the degree that it did this year. I mean, this year, in almost every category, we saw an uptick. Part of it is that February was a little longer this year. The vacation fell right at the end. You know, it doesn't explain it, but it's part of the equation. People were a little tired.
It's snow days right near the entire week.
Right. Yep. There was a lot of disruption to the learning environment from that stuff, but we're going to drill in deeper on our Tuesday session to get some answers to that, because if you look across the first trimester up until February, it was a consistent decline, and then you hit February and it shot up.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, because February probably has a lot of stressors. I don't
Mhm.
know if it's end of.
yep, that was a
semester,
new change of
with the-
semester. Yep.
With
Yep.
the stressors from the exams, that kind of stuff.
Yep.
Athletics has stressors because that's when they start their playoffs.
Yep. You're exactly right. It's usually the
Good news,
darkest,
stressors
coldest
for-
month.
Being home for a week, you're not coming into vacation.
Yep.
We,
We-
that happens the week before, can be a
Yeah.
tough
Yep.
week for
We
learners.
always get an uptick the week leading up to vacation every year for those 2 vacations. Because if there's the sorts of things that often lead to problematic behaviors in school, a lot of times there's triggers at home that influence some of that. So learners know that when they're approaching vacation, they're going to be that, those triggers are going to be around them quite a bit. We see there's predictable instances that we try to head off with some of these learners leading into vacation. It's typically the same ones who have that type of struggle. So yeah, there's definitely a lot. Our goal is to drill into precisely what it was this year, so we can be more proactive going into April break and definitely next year. And then I've got a similar sort of chart looking at in-school suspension incidents. Part of what our longer term vision for supporting behaviors to move to what's called a 0 suspension model. And that doesn't mean nobody ever gets out of school suspended, but it means that when you have out of school suspension taking place, it truly is the only last resort to resolve that behavior. And part of that means we are doing more in-school suspension types of things with support for learning here. But that being said, there are declines in December, a bit of an upswing in January, and then again, a predictable upswing in February, given what else we have been seeing. So just some of the trends that we're already noting. The overall referrals continue to trend down, and in some months substantially so from last school year, which is what we expected to see with some of the interventions we put in place this year. Our major categories continue to trend down, some of the most problematic ones significantly so. Suspensions are continuing an overall downward trend. February was a tough month, and we're going to have more answers for that after we've, had some more time to drill into the data. And social skills definitely remain an area of focus. We're going to have to continue addressing some of the sources of that interaction that leads to disrespect, and that way that the ways of speaking and ways of problem solving, there's a real gap there that we will continue to address primarily at JRMS, but also at the high school.
So is our primary connection between the elementary schools and the middle high school, is that through MTSS, or is that through, is there any communications in the elementary schools regarding these incidents and types of incidences versus the high school, middle school?
We don't have currently a direct line with them. I know that they're working on their own data collection methods. There's some discrepancy, and I'm not deep in the weeds with supporting whatever that is, but their method of collecting and reporting incidences is just different in the elementary schools, which is part of where that MTSS umbrella can help to resolve some of that. So I don't have a lot of information about where they're seeing some trends. I know we meet with them as kids are transitioning into the middle school. So we did have a lot of information about the incoming sixth grade group, which is why they're not even, the sixth graders aren't even close to the top of our concern list, because we did have so much information about how to support them coming over. So there's that connection that's still there, but I know that we're working on the consistency of data and terminology, and that's where the MTSS umbrella is
Okay,
really
great, because
important.
Leslie gave a presentation this week about data collection
Mhm.
and trying to make things consistent. And one of the ways of making it consistent is having the elementary schools and the high school, middle school on the same data collection
Right.
process.
We're using the same tool currently. I just know that the way that they organize the types of referrals and what they call them is different. And so that's part of what has to get ironed out,
So at some point, this will be in with Alma, right? It will all be under that big flower that we saw.
Yes.
It could be. The Alma does have an incident reporting desk. Web to School technically has one now. We're definitely not going to be using the Alma incident reporting desk next year, because right now we have strong data collection with Educators Handbook, and I don't want to, and I know that the other principals are in the same boat. We don't want to abandon the data collection tool we have now that works well until we're sure that Alma can do the same or better. There's also another possibility where there's some grant funding for MTSSB that might require us to switch to a different system called Swiss for discipline data collection. So there's just too much gray area right now to make a jump to Alma for that tool.
Is it a situation where these programs, whatever the this or Swiss or whatever, talks to Alma?
Yeah, they do talk back and forth now, like
Maybe it's a weed.
yeah, currently it's a weed that kind of sucks some of the sun and energy down, but they do talk back and forth. Our state reporting will be a lot easier with Alma because it will pull some of this discipline information over.
Mhm.
It's just not going to store it the same way that we currently get with Educators Handbook.
Okay,
But someday on our data dashboard, we'll get
Yes.
incident information
right.
for the whole district.
Good, it's coming.
It will happen.
I would think of to use the metaphor that was brought up on Monday in the flowers, I would think of Alma as that center, and programs like this as like the petals or the
Right.
vines that connect. So rather than it being, it's just another one of those pieces that all feeds back. and
That's what I
forth.
was wondering, but I wasn't sure if it was one of those leftover pots that wasn't quite in there yet. Is what I was looking at, but in my brain, I was like, so is it ready to be talking to Alma, or is it not talking to it? Is it still in its own pot? I know you guys weren't there, and I'm super sorry that I keep. using
That's
this.
okay.
Great.
The flower.
I have seen the flower. Leslie showed it to me.
Okay.
This, I would view Educators Handbook as like a shoot that's coming off the flower that someday might get reabsorbed back in.
So the end big flower. Educator's Handbook was a petal.
Mhm. That makes sense.
Okay,
But someday it may not even need to be a petal. It just depends on how robust Alma's tools are. So.
okay.
So we know that some things that are continuing, that the data is telling us are continuing to contribute to positive outcomes. We did I'm just going to toot our horn a little bit. We did a good job planning for the challenges with the 7th grade group by building that specific intervention program with skills for success. And that has definitely, if we were to drill into individual learners, you can see the curve bend for many of them as those interventions are taking place. So that has been working well. Definitely something we're going to continue to do. And in fact, we're looking at extending into the next school year, having school counseling even more robustly with the 8th graders as the 7th grade group becomes 8th graders, because we know that need's going to continue. Another positive contributing factor has been our ability to have more classroom guidance from the school counseling team. We've had Mrs. Durest, who's our school adjustment counselor. She's been able to get into more classrooms with learners. There's been a lot more going on with Miss Rokes, who's 6th and 7th grade. She's been able to work with teachers. There's been a lot of teacher, counselor, learner meetings to help resolve some of those disrespect kinds of situations. So that's been having a positive impact. And we've continued to increase the amount of time that we're able to spend doing restorative mindset we're not at a restorative justice kind of model, but our mindset is continuing to evolve more towards education and away from the punitive tools that don't always work as well. So those are things that we're doing well that we're definitely going to continue to do, but we do have more work to do, and there's definite areas for growth. So our next steps are going to include that admin team PLC data dive that we're starting on Tuesday of next week. We're going to really farm this data together, look at things that stand out, and come up with some strategies that we can do to then turn around and support the classrooms more for the last 3 months of the year. So the ongoing classroom strategies will really come out of that data dive. And then our school counseling team is looking at targeting more intense classroom guidance at the grade levels where we're noticing these trends continuing to or starting to swing back up again. So this is the time of the year last year where we had that same approach. We really noticed, okay, these areas are starting to struggle, and we kind of deployed the school counseling team to those hotspot areas to help put out some of those more intense areas. So we have a plan that's starting to form. That first piece will develop the middle one much more so after we get past next Tuesday. And then we've got some academic updates. This is just whoa. Is that slide blank for you, Nick?
Yes.
Oh, that's not good. So when you click, it doesn't do anything else? Okay. Nope, here, let me send this to you again. There should be. What's really odd is I just sent it to you and it's. So while there's an intermission, are there any questions on the disciplines sort of stuff?
No, it's good to see the comparison year over year. It's only a small part of the picture. At the end of the year, we'll see a
Yes.
bigger, bigger picture.
Mine. Do not steal it, please. Okay, let's try one more time. Sorry about that. What's odd is I sent it to you as we all were sitting in here. I haven't made any changes to it, so that's concerning. And I'm looking at the right stuff. One piece of data that I was hoping to provide but was not able to do so yet is the look at truancy. And the reason I was not comfortable doing that today is as I was finalizing the presentation, I saw about 30 more notices coming through my inbox. I was like, okay, the data is already, it's not good data. So that will be at our end of year. We'll be able to show what last year versus this year with truancy, because that's a whole nother piece of culture that we've been really trying to focus on supporting getting kids in.
You said not good data. Did that mean the data was not having a good trend, or do you mean the data was?
It was not
flawed?
valid. It was flawed data. The trend for the truancy, I can already tell just anecdotally, and I have a spreadsheet that we're all kind of keeping, has been very positive, but it would have been way too flawed. I mean, it was a lot of 5-day notices coming in today. So
Ta-da.
yeah. Oh, there it is. Okay. So this fall and winter on the academic side, whoops. Okay. We've been focusing on 3 key areas just based on the data that we had from last year. One of them, whoops. There we go. One of them has been working with a former staff member of the building, Michelle Duran, who was a longtime ELA teacher. We've been having her come in and do some consulting work. She basically redesigned our whole 6th grade writing program last year to great success. And so we had her coming in, and she's continuing to do so to support our English language arts teachers, really building writing literacy skills, helping them with building more rigor into the writing in the classroom. So that's been a heavy focus with that team. We've also been sending teams of teachers, first in the ELA, both middle and high school, and we've started to extend it to content areas, into some specific writing and literacy kind of foundational trainings. One of the things that schools all across the country are discovering with much more emphasis is that every teacher has to basically be a literacy teacher, as if you're teaching reading and writing for the first time. There's so many gaps at this point that even science, social studies, math teachers are now finding themselves needing that really foundational remediation type of support. So that we've been sending these teams of teachers to these trainings that have been highly successful, immediate impact in the classroom. That's been really nice to have that kind of filtering out and building that culture of high expectation with reading and writing. Math, we've been focusing, go ahead.
But that's what your curriculum is based on, is the fact that you'll be using ELA skills in
Correct.
your science courses.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And it used like when I taught social studies, of course, there were some things that I had to teach with reading and writing, but the gaps are so wide now that it's even teaching like how you piece out words and how you break apart longer, pieces, parts of speech. It's like that foundational that every teacher is finding themselves really struggling with. So it's taking that tier one kind of everybody should be teaching this, but magnifying it quite a bit. With math, a lot of our beginning of the year focus was on grade 8 math and ensuring that the rigor of our 8th grade program meets or exceeds Algebra 1 benchmarks, because every learner who finishes 8th grade should be, in theory, algebra ready and have completed Algebra 1. So we've invested a lot of time, and the math teacher we hired this year has been doing a phenomenal job with those algebra skills, and then continuing to work on alignment of the learning goals with New Hampshire SAS in particular. And then our PLCs, of course, this fall and winter was a lot on building data analysis skills and still working on those structures. With a caveat here, there's been a substantial system problem with the New Hampshire SAS that we uncovered for them. And so we do not have ELA data for grade 6. So when we get to ELA, you'll see there's no grade 6 ELA. The reason being that the Cambium assessment system that the state uses was not shutting off people's like testing windows in the state. So what was happening was learners were signing in to take the winter assessment, and it was sending them back and saying, okay, here's where you left off in the fall, even though they were finished. So they were unable, it was a big problem. So some of it was resolved, but we just got the last email today that ELA is fixed. So we should have ELA data soon. But anyway, this is math. All we have here is the performance distribution. The raw scores were again corrupted by that issue with the Cambium system, but we were able to get this. The 6th grade math, we have the fall on the left. This is where they came in from 5th grade. We had 13% at level 3, 2% at level 4. And then you can see 43% level 2, 43% level 1. At the winter testing, that we had a decent increase in the level 3 learners, up to 22%. That was an increase of 9 learners. 1 additional learner was in the level 4 category, and then things were stable at level 1. And of course, the decrease in level 2 were learners who went up into level 3 or 4.
I'm a little confused real quick. So when you say red level 1,
Correct.
orange 2, 3, 4,
Yes.
is that what scale is level 1, level 4? 1 being
1 is basically not at standards, like well below.
okay.
2
so
is
literally
developing.
following the 1 through 4
Yes.
scale here.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
But this is the SAS language. So I don't know off the top of my head what their descriptor is, but it's the same thing.
So you're looking at 13% proficient, 23% proficient.
Correct. Or above. Yep. Yep. And these are interim assessments. So there's obviously time for them to learn quite a bit, but what we look for is growth. And you can drill in deeper, which the teacher here will be doing. We'll explain what our plan is in a little bit, but you drill in deeper, you can even see like the number system, how many more have made growth there, geometry, how many have made growth there, and things like that. Yeah. Grade 7, the fall is on the left, the winter's on the right. Obviously not a great picture. We have some learners who have backslid a little bit. Unfortunately, we lost 1 from level 4 and we lost 2 from level 3. And then again, no substantial change to level 1.
Keeping in mind, this is also the class that has quite a bit of behaviors.
Correct. Yep, correct. And then grade 8, we don't have fall SAS data because they take the PSAT 8-9 in the fall and then again in the spring. So the comparison we can make here is where they ended last spring with the SAS type of assessment versus where they are at the 8th grade standards now. So again, not necessarily a great picture that we would be pleased to be sharing. And we'll talk about our plan for that in a moment and where we think it's coming from. ELA, this is grade 7 because again, grade 6, we have no winter data currently. But the fall we had 36% that were level 3 or above. That is now up to 47% that are level 3 or above. So we've got substantial growth in our 7th grade ELA scores. You can see the level 1 has basically cut in half, and most of those learners have jumped into 2, and many of the 2s then jumped into 3 or 5. So this is when I talked about our focus on working with Mrs. Durand, really focusing on building out the right types of instructional support, looking at the empowering writers and the keys to literacy trainings. We're seeing that immediate impact, and that we're having a large jump in learners getting into that level 3 or 4 category overall.
Have you seen like good, I don't even want to call it good success or whatever. Have you seen a benefit, I guess, to in 6th grade, you guys split reading and writing? I don't think you haven't done that 7th and 8th grade, right?
Nope, correct.
Have you seen a benefit from that out of 6? Is that something you might trend to do for the other grades because it's good?
It's if we were able to add more staff, I would definitely suggest doing that. But yeah, I mean, what we're seeing here, even coming in the fall, where these learners retained at 36% of them came into 7th grade already at proficient or above on the 7th grade standards.
Yeah.
That is a testament to the reading and writing support they had back in 6th grade.
Right.
And the speed with which the 7th grade teacher is able to pump the rigor and have them writing longer is much faster than we've had in years past, because their foundation is much stronger.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, that's had a nice impact.
Yeah, that's good.
And then 8th grade, again, we don't have a direct fall to winter comparison. So unfortunately, we can only go back to where they were last year at the end of the year. But once again, we don't see any backsliding here. We see 1 additional learner at level 1, less learners at level 2, slightly more by 1 at level 3, and then a little bit less at level 4. But the general level 3 or above percentage is the same. It's 35% last spring, still 35% this year. And the problem with this type of comparison is that the winter 2023 is measuring the 8th grade benchmarks, not the 7th grade benchmark. So it's not an apples to apples kind of comparison, but it's the best we can do at this point. So we have, for the last chunk of the year, to really push that proficiency level up, math is going to be a very intense focus for the next 2 months, 2 to 3 months, until we get the end of year SAS testing. Next Friday, we have the middle school math teachers spending a PD day. We're looking at the transfer of their math skills to this type of test. What's interesting is we've watched the quality of instruction and the expectation increase substantially, and the learners are able to do the skills. But what's happening, and the teachers observed this during the testing window, the SAS questions are substantially different from just having the skills. They require you to problem solve. They require you to identify errors, things that require the transfer of that skill set. So what we're believing the data is showing us at this point is that the learners need more practice with that type of questioning and that type of responding. So next Friday, we're going to be doing some training where the math teachers in the middle school take some of the modular assessments that the kids are taking, reflect on the questions, look at Otis, which has built-in tools that integrate with New Hampshire SAS. So you can actually build the exact types of questions that they use on SAS into Otis, do some training and practice building those questions, and then come up with ways to daily have learners practicing SAS types of questions so that transfer can happen much more concretely. What's interesting is when you look at individual learners, you can see that they have every question right for a while, and then they just gave up and stopped. So that tells us that the skill is there, but the ability to quickly transfer it and have then the kind of grit to make it through is where we're now falling really short. So it'll be interesting to see as we get to the end of the year, once we've had this PD, worked on building the tools to use the SAS, build more consistency in the classroom, what we would expect to see is an increase in those scores. And if that's not the case, we're going to have to go back.
Do you see any correlation between the ELA skills and math scores, for example? Because I know they use a lot of word problems. And that's when you talk about transfer, being able to transfer the formulas that you learn in the classroom to the words that they put on the test. So
I think there is a correlation, but I don't know if that's the barrier with the learners at this point, because in a lot of cases, learners who are scoring very well on the ELA portion are not doing well on the math at all. I think when you look at the actual SAS questions, they really it'll ask you to identify all of the possible correct answers from a list of many answers, which requires you to quickly solve the problem in many different ways and then be able to identify from that list. What's happening is the learners are solving it for one way and then getting stuck and not being able to move on. It's stuff like that. Or they're really complex geometry problems that require you to transfer, this type of equation and this type of equation and bring them together. And they're struggling because they know this and they know this, but they don't know how to bring it together. It's things like that that they're seeing are really the gumming up at this point. So we're going to focus on making sure that that practice is built in regularly with the expectation that we see some growth between now and end of the year.
David, I don't know what types of testing, all the testing that's out there and whatnot, but it sounds more like teaching to the test for math.
Mhm.
Is that what you're moving towards, is like making sure that their test, because, and I totally understand, like I get like they're getting these skills, so like they're math grades and they're doing great in math,
Mhm.
but then on the test they're not doing well, like the big test.
Correct.
Whatever. So I can see the fact that obviously if they can't, there's still some skills missing. But I don't know, I don't even know if I guess I'm not even saying it's a bad thing, you know what I mean?
Yep.
Because obviously it's a skill that they're lacking in.
I think what you're asking is, am I encouraging people to just teach to the test type of a thing? And I would say the answer is no, because if it was the old style, like kneecap tests that were literally just like rote types of memorizing knowledge, I would never agree with that. The New Hampshire SAS requires high levels of thinking, which is kind of where we want kids going anyways, and a lot of knowledge transfer. And teachers should be integrating that anyways into their classroom.
I thought I heard you saying.
Yeah, so what we're working on next Friday is really looking at how we could take the instruction already happening, and instead of assessing with a tool that doesn't align with the type of thinking or assessing that the standards are requiring, how can we help teachers write questions that mirror what the complexity and the thinking skills that we would then see on SAS?
Right.
So it's more like integrating the tests that they're going to be assessed with at the end of the year and using that to practice and assess in the classroom.
Do you see that it's more of like a, so I don't know if this is working or not, but it sounds like a lot of the SAS stuff
Mhm.
is almost like level 4. It sounds more of that, like you said, okay, so you have all these skills in the 3s, you can do this, even 2, you've got all this stuff, but now you're looking at the more complex area of a level 4. And are the students just not striving to get to the level 4? Should that be brought down into the top of level 3?
This
More
is
of a situation?
This is more like having 2 level 3s kind of meet in a room and have to figure out how they're going to get along and solve a problem together.
Right.
It's more like that, because to get the level 3s on SAS, because we've done a lot of aligning of our learning goals in the last 2 years with math to the state's kind of CCSS goals. The level 3s are very similar,
Yeah.
but it's being able to recognize that this level 3 and this level 3 are both needed,
Right.
along with this English level 3, to be able to Charlie's point, to be able to read and understand the problem, which some of them are lengthy
Yeah.
paragraphs that have little fill-in boxes.
Yeah.
It requires bringing lots of that kind of level 3 skill into one problem and then solving it pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And that's where kids get gummed up. What's
Yeah.
interesting is the PSAT scores are usually substantially higher than the SAS scores, but the measurement is very different. A lot of the PSAT is more of your traditional, more isolated kind of skills being used.
Yeah.
And I think too, with the PSATs, it's timed. There's these warnings that come up
Yeah.
both on their screen and by the proctor. And as somebody who kind of coordinates the testing and I do all the makeup testing, learners will, at those long paragraphs, sit there
With the SAS.
with the SAS and sit there or in front of the essay and just sit there while they're thinking. And we did a whole thing with the middle school around tips and tricks for taking the assessment, what to do when you're stuck, because you can come back to the question. So kind of understanding what they're going to see so they can demonstrate what they know. And I think that's the other reason why it's important for the teachers to experience that, because accessing a calculator looks different on a digital exam than in the classroom. The type of paper, the supplies they can use, it all looks different. So we want also our teachers to experience that so they can help support their learners through that process.
It's so hard seeing it like on both sides and seeing like,
Right.
I get what you're saying. Like, yeah, this all is amazing. And to get to that, almost like a 4, you get to that, putting it all together. And I get what you're saying too, with like the burnout. Kids get through these things, and then they're
Right.
like, I've done so much, stop asking me about this
Right.
question.
Exactly.
And so as a teacher, it's so hard to keep pulling them deeper into it when they're like, literally giving you
Mm.
so many steps already, and they shut down.
Yeah,
Especially at that middle school level where they're like, I'm done, I'm ready to shut down. So to pull them that much further, it's like,
what our writing teachers and
So
reading
hard for
teachers kind
teachers.
of, or ELA teachers, what they've been doing to, again, to a lot of success is doing a lot of that practice regularly to build endurance is the word that they use. The more that they're doing it in the classroom, they're obviously, it's like any muscle, they stretch it a little bit at a time and eventually it's able to go a lot further. That's kind of where we want the math team to focus, if that's a better analogy.
Yeah.
The more that they're stretching that mind muscle regularly with that type of practice, the less likely it is that a learner will spend 25 minutes on one question and then have 25 more in front of them. And then it's like, okay, well, I've just spent 20. Exactly. If we can get them spending 5 minutes or 3 minutes or whatever, because it's a much more quick for them to access that knowledge bank, then we'll get to a place where they're able to get through the test and have that endurance.
so almost
But-
like a quick entry question, exit
Exactly,
question.
exactly.
To like the quick.
Exactly.
keep
That's
going.
that's one of the strategies we're going to talk about next week.
Yeah.
And on their other types of assessments in the classroom, throw one of these questions in there as well. It doesn't have to be
Yeah,
every one of them,
right.
but start with one and then maybe the next time there's two and so on.
Right,
So
right.
that's what next Friday is really going to heavily focus on.
Okay.
And we're looking to create the same type of consistent PD that we're now doing with our literacy classes. Identifying high quality math instructional PD is a little harder. It's harder to find. The nice thing about the keys to literacy and empowering writing PDs is they have both synchronous and asynchronous options, so we can get staff into them a little more regularly. Math tends to require somebody here to do that PD, and that's a little bit harder to find. So that middle box is one we're still working on, and we've been working with Ruben already. I've kind of looped him in, and we're going to try to look for some options. But the goal is to continue to build consistency in both instructional technique as well as in the use of SAS types of skills and questions in the classroom, with the goal being in the next few months to at least see some development and get to a better place by the end of the year.
I know I'm kind of getting off. This stuff is just so interesting to me, but
That's okay.
I know you were trying to do some co-teaching, right?
Mhm.
And that's why we have those big blocks, little blocks, skinny, whatever you call them.
Right.
Have you seen success? Like, so now I'm thinking like as a teacher, you're trying to do all these things that you're talking about, and it's like you can get into it and you're like, oh my gosh, you're trying to think, but then you have that 7th grade group that's got these behavior issues.
Right.
So have you seen success in the co-teaching where the teachers get some relief from like, okay, you're gonna have to take these ones that need to be over there
Mhm.
because, do you know what I'm saying? Like,
I do,
you
yeah.
have that-
Yep. Some of the best success that we've had have been scenarios where case managers in the middle school in particular on a grade level team have a kind of seamless relationship with the content teacher.
Yeah.
And even some of our instructional associates are in this same boat. I was just talking to a teacher in the 6th grade the other day who explained how there's this seamless like grouping and regrouping with
Yeah.
that individual. Where we see that happening with, I guess, organically
Yeah.
and kind of naturally, it has a big impact because you
Yeah.
can then take those 3 or 4 learners who maybe need to be in a smaller environment
Yeah.
and you can separate them out.
So how many case managers do you have?
In the middle school, there's
Yeah.
still 1 per grade level.
Okay,
So
so it's just so hard to get
it's
extra people.
it's about the quality of that relationship between the two as well.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean either person is not trying,
Oh, gosh.
but sometimes it
Right.
just takes time to build that trust up so you can
Yeah.
then do a lot of that movement.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
great questions. I appreciate it.
Oh.
Honestly, data can be very dry. This is like a dialogue. It's nice. So, and we're also focusing on the ELA world. We're going to continue rolling out the additional content areas, those keys to literacy trainings, so we can continue to develop a consistent vocabulary, a consistent toolbox and things like that, and build comfort for teachers in any content area to attack some of those fundamental reading and writing skills and keep pushing up that rigor of expectation for writing in particular. This year, because we did really find success with that 6th grade reading and writing model, we were able to develop a 9th grade writing class. That's kind of a writing workshop using existing personnel. And this year was kind of seeing what types of learning goals we could pull in, how we can have that writing teacher maybe working with some of the writing happening in content classes. We're continuing to develop that. It has definitely had a positive impact on grade 9 learners with their writing skills. So we're going to continue to support that and grow it over the summertime in particular. And then the last piece is to increase the amount of writing that's happening, as has already been the case this year. All of our content teachers have expressed that they are seeking through their PLCs, building more writing and in particular argumentative writing skills. So our focus for the next few months is going to be to continue to support that work that our teachers are recognizing as a big need. So that's what we've got.
So I assume that, when I heard you talking about getting frustrated not completing versus erroneous answers.
Right.
Okay, that you've done some analysis of that, that determined that's one of your primary causes
Mhm.
of the, not being in the higher proficiency areas.
And our PLCs are continuing to drill even further into that, but that's when we see data like that with math, we just got off of the not making good progress list. We're not going to allow even a moment to go by without trying to resolve that. So the middle school math team was very on board with meeting next week right away and doing our own intense dive in. And then again, kind of focusing on how we can help learners build that endurance. But we're not going to be shy about the data. It is what it is. And we're going to keep on,
Well,
confronting
you
it head
can't-
on.
you can't Resolve it unless you
Right.
address it.
Correct.
I'm assuming too, like with the writing of the ELA part. You're gonna see that same trend of the fatigue, like that's the biggest thing with getting kids to write,
Mhm.
it's like. All right, I've given you this much.
Right.
I don't wanna keep going, I've said everything I need to say in this much. And so it's
Yeah.
hard, that's really hard to get them.
Having
Keep
that,
going.
you're exactly right. And I think why we've seen such growth in ELA, and I expect to continue to see that, is because they did so much writing and are doing so much writing in sixth grade. The seventh grade English teacher this year has been really pushing them. She's had them writing, they're up to the point of writing full kind of papers like they would do in high school the second part of the year. And the quality has been increasing with each iteration of it. And in the eighth grade, the social studies teacher is jumping in too. She's got all sorts of simulations going on, and then they're writing papers. And the expectation is now just pretty consistent that when a teacher says write, they typically mean many sentences. At the beginning of the year, there was a lot of, do we have to write full sentences? In many cases, they're not even asking now. They just kind of know, yeah, we want quality, large amounts of
And
writing.
it's almost like you have to kind of like as teachers, like they're so good at all that, but like breaking that down, you go from
Right.
like. Those little tiny things where it just asks one question.
Right.
Write it in a complete sentence.
Right.
Because everybody's gotten lazy to the point where they're
Yeah.
like, just give me the answer.
Right,
You know
exactly,
what I mean?
right.
Whereas and now being like, okay, this has really become a problem.
Right.
Start, answer it in a complete
Right.
sentence.
And they've been looking at the types of questions they even ask. Part of it's always fun when you're looking at somebody's assessment and they ask you to look at the questions. It's like, all right, remember that you've asked them a yes or no question. So you have kids. What do you think they're going to give you for an answer?
Yeah.
Let's look at how you can make them think a little bit. But our teachers are doing a lot of that on their own in their PLCs as well. Which is again the whole point of that process. So.
Great.
The other thing that I can share tonight that's really exciting, as part of our PLC development, the state has a partnership with Teach United, which is all about building teacher leaders and PLC process within schools. And you have to apply. It was this whole grant process. And the middle and high school here just got accepted into that. So we're one of just a small handful of states that's going to be partnering with this organization to really develop our teacher leaders and push that use of data over a 2-year cycle of time. So that's another piece. It was so late into the game, I couldn't even put it in here, but we'll be having 6 teacher leaders kind of working on that over the next 2 years, which again, will reinforce that use of data and improving instruction. So pretty exciting.
It is. May eventually see a dashboard afterward.
Maybe they'll do it. Yeah, maybe this is for them. So,
It's good. It's so hard to like look at. Like you have such a great, amazing group of teachers in this school. And it's, sitting on one side of it, and seeing all of the things that should be done, need to be done. And it's just so different once you get, you
Yeah,
get into
yeah.
that classroom and you're like, I know what we need to do, we just can't get there.
right, but
Because there's so many other components that are
Right,
happening in the
right.
classroom.
Yep.
And it's just crazy, it's
Yep.
crazy,
Yep.
it's crazy, the teachers here.
It was
are phenomenal.
we have a phenomenal staff. We have a phenomenal group of kids. And you're exactly right. I've been covering that AP classrooms for the last however many weeks now, but being back in there has been a great reminder of, as an administrator, how complicated learning and teaching is, but doing it is always a really great reminder. And it's actually helped to inform a lot of the things that I'm then turning around and working with staff on. But you're exactly right. That's the complex part of all of this is making sure that teachers and learners still have the space to teach and learn
Right.
despite all the other things
And
going
that
on.
was kind of my point to like that support, you know, everybody's always like, do you get the support you need? And you're like, I don't even know, like, what are you asking me? Like, no,
Right.
obviously I could think of thousands of support that I would need, but like, I think that some of that support comes from that co-teaching and having the instructional
Mhm.
associates working together with you. I remember
Right.
working with Joe, like, he literally was like having a walking dictionary in my room, like, it was just like the amount of information that he had, and we were able to really bounce off each other.
Yeah.
That's so important with teaching, and the kids see that engagement
Mhm.
and they get excited because the two
Right.
teachers are working, like, it's
Right.
just, it's nothing better than having extra people, and I know, I get it, the whole budget thing and the money thing, but like, the way things
Yeah, that little thing.
skinny nuts to whatever classes, it just seems like it just, hopefully it can trend in the right direction.
Yeah.
So that's good for the teachers.
Good
I think
stuff.
I've taken up a lot,
Thanks.
sorry.
We're gonna keep rocking and rolling. That's all we can do. So.
All right, well, if you guys have nothing else, I will try to stop talking now.
Please don't. I honestly, that, like I said, the last couple meetings for me have been the most fun because it's been dialogue and it's been exciting stuff. So you don't ever have to apologize to me for asking questions or giving opinions or whatever. I think that's why we're here. But so our next meeting would be April 13th.
April 13th.
That sound right? April 13th at 4:30. Second Thursday, and it will be MTSSB update, and then I'm also going to be speaking to possibly the elementary schools. It's about 1 year at this point where they've been using Zern. So I haven't talked to them at all about this, but one of my ideas is to address them and see if there's a willingness or a need to come back and sort of update the ed committee on how Zern's been rolling out. But I'm going to speak to the principals there anyways and try to find a good topic for them to come and discuss, because I think you've probably seen enough of us for a little while.
So next week, you said is that we're doing MTT?
MTSSB update, and then hopefully an elementary presentation. My suggestion is going to be to update on Zern, but I'll talk to them first and see what their thoughts are.
Sorry. Okay, thank you. Sorry, I gotta see if she's okay. Sorry.
So. Back to the CTE thing,
Mhm.
when it was brought up at our last board meeting. It was asked about adding a early childhood specific piece. Because Conval has education, but not early education.
I thought they did do early.
So they do, early, they actually do early all the way through high school. So the, internship piece comes at different times and it's based on learner interest and needs. So the state used to have an early childhood education option, and they changed that to careers and education so that it could encompass all levels, not just the early childhood. So that's why a lot of centers have changed and had to shift. So it should be covered in that program. And actually, Conval offers a human development course that learners can take. Our learners can access that course before they enter into the careers in ed program. I know, it'd be nice.
I would love to find a way at some point to have our high school kids being able to work in a preschool in the district here. That's a really good model.
Even, I don't know if you said that, even like the kids running, like a
Mhm.
daycare, like you have teachers bringing their kid, like a
Yep.
daycare.
Yep,
The kids could work at.
Right.
And it's amazing.
it's an amazing opportunity, and yep.
For students.
And it's a beautiful
Everybody.
culture builder, and it helps build leadership. And there's so many
Kids
benefits to doing
melt
it.
when they see little tiny children. Come on, you see your seniors being like.
You see the freshmen doing that too.
It's well, would be great because you feel love.
Well,
really
right now, our
does.
learners are going to Dublin 2 days a week as part of the careers and ed program. So it would be nice if they could come back here and engage here.
I
At least
agree.
those learners that were interested in the early childhood education, learners that are interested in middle and high school can go to other schools, because they can't necessarily be here all the time, but yeah, that would be great.